Hi, welcome to another masterclass that we're doing here for our Pathways group and for our community. I'm Doc Edwards, and I'm here today with Sarah Schooler from Thrive Lactation Center. We have been working together in our Fort Myers location now. She was actually our very first tenant. When she contacted me about what she had to offer, I said, I've been looking for you. Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited about what we're building here. And what we wanted to do in this master class is talk about breastfeeding, talk about challenges that some moms face, and ways that Sarah can help resolve them. Give you a little background about who she is, why she's so passionate about this, why she's been so successful at helping other moms, and really where our partnership and intersection are as providers who look at the body as something that's really smart on the inside. And we just have to sometimes figure out some puzzle pieces in order to get it working well. Without any further ado, Sarah, thank you very much for joining us on this class. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, we have already had a lot of patients in common, and I know that just from my interactions with you. Obviously, I'm a big fan of yours, and I've been following you on Instagram for a while, and I think you've if you haven't had a chance to peek into her room here, it is gorgeous. She redesigned the whole thing, and it's super pretty. But yeah, one of the things that I think that people are always curious about is what brought you to the area,
Sure.
and tell us a little bit about you being a mom and deciding to do this.
Yeah, so what brought me to Naples from Atlanta was I have three boys. So their ages currently 5, 3, and 15 months. So a lot of chaos at my house. And my husband got a flexible travel job. And we were like, hey, where's the closest family member that will help us watch our kids?
Yeah.
So that's what brought us here. I actually live in Estero. My in laws live in Bonita. So a lot more of a family environment. We were kind of floating out there on our own in Atlanta. And as much as I learned there, from a lactation perspective, where I was working, we just needed some balance with family. So that's what moved us here. I initially started my practice at Thrive Lactation Center in Atlanta in 2019. So did some business there and then relocated here at the end of 2019. So right after I started, kind of just started all over,
Wow.
which is fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to kind of get to know the area, get to know the providers in the area, really network, and really build a practice here and get a good patient base. So,
Yeah, that's one of the sneaky things about this area is very family friendly.
mhm.
We have a lot of people who have just moved to this area, and I think that's one of the nice surprises that they're finding is that this is really a great place to raise kids. We although our resources aren't like Atlanta level
Sure.
resources, the providers that we have here are super committed,
Hmm.
and usually younger and have had some experience, and just personally and also professionally. I thought it was really interesting when you and I started talking about the kind of structure that you've set up here for classes and individual consultations. What do you usually, who do you look for as a client, and how do you help them?
Yeah, so my ideal client is anybody who's pregnant, expecting a mom, whether it's your first time being pregnant, delivering, or your fifth time. I really embrace anybody who's looking to learn more about breastfeeding, even prior to conception, people that are interested in that. So my structure is really meeting people where they're at in their life and where they are in their breastfeeding process, and really examining, if you had no challenges at all, what do you want your day to look like? How do you want feeding your baby to fit in with your family? And asking the right questions to get to a goal that works for that person and for their lifestyle and how they want to spend time with their baby. And then really kind of backing up and saying, okay, this is where you are now. How do we get to where you really want to be? So, ideal client is just anybody who's looking to know more about breastfeeding, or is struggling, or things are going great and you just need a little bit of support, somebody to say like, hey, you're doing a great job, this is how we know why your baby's thriving
Sure.
while breastfeeding. So
Yeah, and the I think the education piece is also important. Like you said, there's what we would like the opportunity for all babies to experience is to be able to latch on, and to preserve some kind of breastfeeding
sure.
relationship. The World Health Organization has been the kind of the standard bearer for breastfeeding and dragging the U.S. along,
Hmm.
you know,
Dragging.
for kicking
We're
and
dragging our
screaming.
heels.
I know, right? Because it used to be that the recommendation was, oh yeah, see if you can get to 6 months,
Hmm.
and now they're starting to see that, oh yeah, there's a clear benefit to a year. I mean, my kids have nursed into their like three and a half,
Sure.
because that's just there's so much more to a breastfeeding relationship than
Hmm.
just the nutrition, right?
And I love that you say that because I even catch myself trying to change the way I word breastfeeding. Instead of saying, "Are you feeding your baby?" Every 2 to 3 hours, it's so much more than just food for
Mm-hmm.
babies, for toddlers. And so we kind of have to reorient ourselves from just being feeding focused or volume focused in relation to breastfeeding and really looking at all the other things that it does. Comfort, like, yes, it's nutrition, but it's so much more than that. Circadian rhythm comes into play
Mm.
through the components of breast milk. So it's doing so much for brain development, not just hydration and food. So really looking at how that comes to play in the family life and how can we really encourage those aspects that don't get a lot of attention here in the US.
Right.
Comfort sucking gets a bad rap. Oh, don't let your baby use you as your pacifier. That's biologically normal to do that or to nurse a baby to sleep. So really educating on those aspects of things that can improve the whole family life that we don't even really talk about that much here in the US.
Right. Yeah, I love that too, because one of the big ways that we find this intersection is in the reflex development for newborns. You know, do we have things like the rooting reflex?
Mhm.
What is the suck and latch looking like? So that not only is it important for them to be able to nurse early on, but that sets the foundation inside the brain later on for things like, is your child going to be a picky eater? You know,
Mhm.
if they have poor oral motor tone, then food's going to feel really weird in their mouth. They're not
Sure.
going to really like crunchy textures. They're going to be like, oh, broccoli's a terrible
Yeah,
thing.
even from a flavor profile. So foods we eat flavor the breast milk, and that's giving them exposures to all of those different food components. And if they don't have breast milk and formula is just consistent
Yeah.
always, they don't get those food exposure, those taste exposures. And that's really a cultural aspect too. So if you look at countries like India where their food profiles tend to be spicier, those babies are more tolerable when they start table foods of those spicier foods.
Huh.
So really cool that it brings that into play too.
Yay for tacos.
Yeah.
Right. Because yeah, that's one of the I think one of the most amazing things about breast milk to me is how dynamic it
Mhm.
is, right? It changes as baby grows. One of the things that I've always found really fascinating, I've heard, tell me if this is true or not, I've heard that there are ducks that work as kind of like a grocery list. So when the baby's saliva can get in contact with the nipple, it kind of reads those chemical messengers
Mhm.
to change what's going on. So even if like let's say that a baby has a bigger need for like a different fat content or different kinds of proteins, the body can respond to that. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yep. So it changes the components of breast milk, fats, protein, sugars, carbs, all of that change feeding to feeding. So sometimes on the hour,
Oh wow.
we're having different components come through, vitamin minerals shift. Same is true for germs.
Huh.
So that communication from mouth to breast happens for bacteria, viruses, fungus, anything babies are exposed to. We see those immunities come through in the breast milk. So there are these really cool studies where a baby goes to daycare, they swab all of the germs there, they swab the home for a set of germs. They take germs that are only at daycare, not at home, and they don't let mom in the daycare anymore. Baby comes home, feeds with mom, and she makes immunities for those germs that
Oh,
she's
that's
never been
wild.
exposed to herself. So the communication is crazy, and we still don't
Wow.
understand all of how that works.
Yeah.
So for the most part, speaking of like components, when we talk about like hydrate, as a breastfeeding mom,
Hmm.
like make sure you're eating well, most of that is to care for the mother because the breast milk is going to take everything you've got to keep it consistent and perfect to meet baby's needs. So we really deplete ourselves to make the milk perfect. So when we're talking about hydration and take your multivitamin, all of that, it really mostly changes it in the mom. It's really hard to change fat components, vitamin components with dietary changes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that's kind of getting popular, at least in our circle with perinatal chiropractic, is having a conversation about postnatal depletion syndrome.
Hmm.
that, you know, here you've grown this baby, and usually it comes around with like the second baby or third
Sure.
baby. You've grown these babies and you've been feeding these babies, and you know this is all coming out of your body.
Hmm.
What kind of conversations do you have with moms who are maybe it's their second or third baby
Yeah,
about
so
things they
just
can
for
do?
a personal standpoint, I can speak to that. I've breastfeed 3 kids, and over time, I've been working with my dentist because my teeth are changing consistency. They're getting translucent. So
Oh
I've been
wow.
experiencing calcium depletion over the last 6 years of pregnancy and breastfeeding, and I'm starting to see it leach out of my teeth. It
Oh
was
boy.
literally sucking it from everywhere to make my breast milk perfect, which is great. I appreciate that. So yeah, really looking at, a lot of moms, I encourage them, like, when you go, you still keep your routine, physician physicals,
Hmm.
because they're going to do that annual blood work for you, and you're able to break down, like, do I have enough vitamin D, do I have enough calcium in my blood to be able to support
Hmm.
yourself, and kind of getting those labs. Same with moms who may have thyroid, issues during pregnancy or prior to pregnancy. We need to continue to monitor those things. So really, just kind of setting those reminders to care for yourself, do those normal well visits, and monitor that, because the depletion is there. But many practitioners don't think about that, or don't even talk to their patient as a breastfeeding mom when they're just a family practitioner.
Yeah, it's a good point too, because if a mom doesn't realize that she has thyroid issues, one way that that can show up sometimes is in the nursing
Mhm.
relationship. How would a mom how would a mom probably recognize that maybe something's going on
Sure.
with her endocrine system
Yeah,
that
so
way?
that's a mom where they're getting all adequate stimulation they need. They're eating well, they're taking care of themselves, and we just don't see that milk supply where it needs to be.
Hmm.
Baby's needs are a lot higher than what mom is able to produce. So those are questions to be asking. If we have tried everything, we're increasing pumping in addition to nursing, we're doing all the right things, and we're just not seeing her body get there. When that happens, there's usually some kind of medical indication, or if we know ahead of time, I can look at a health history and go, oh, we need to work a little harder to get the supply where it needs to be for this mom once she delivers, because we have some of these red flags coming up. So it's really rare that a mom just truly does not make enough milk for
Hmm.
her baby. Usually there's other aspects coming in when that's the case. Usually when I talk to a mom and I'm like, hey, you're not making the milk you want to be making, where are you at? Usually stimulation is the number one thing
Hmm.
that we're lacking. So it's really rare that we see a dyad where it just truly isn't enough milk.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Man, talk about somebody who knows their stuff. We're real lucky. Do you have, if you think back in your career so far, do you have any favorite stories? Like someone that you were like, man, this is why I get up in the morning.
Yeah. So I was a NICU nurse for 5 years before I even got into lactation.
Hmm.
So I have, I started doing breastfeeding education as a NICU nurse, actually. And so seeing a premature baby get exclusively breast milk and thrive through that period and come out the other side just like nothing ever happened, right? 32-week or even younger sometimes.
Oh wow.
And those moms work so hard. And that's a really long term relationship as
Yeah.
far as a lactation consultant working with a mom. So, that's months that you're spending with them. And it's a long road for those moms. They're separated from their babies, they're exclusively pumping. It's a lot of work. It's hard to wake up for your pump at 3 in the morning when your
Yeah.
baby's not there. So, those are, when I look back on some of those relationships, I still am friends with some of them on Facebook and watch their babies grow and thrive, and it's really cool.
Oh,
It's cool. So even just recently, my main focus in my practice is that moms feel supported. And part of that is being available to my clients for text or phone in between appointments. So I really get to know, like, their mindset, if they're
yeah.
struggling with something, how hard they're working to meet their goals. And then we get to the end and I'm like, I don't think you need me anymore. Like,
Hmm.
you're in a good place, and look how far you've come from when I first came, and you've met your goal that we set on day one. And how cool that is to have helped somebody literally change the course of their baby's life
Right.
from a developmental point, from an ongoing health point. I mean, breastfeeding prevents development of type 2 diabetes years down the road for these babies, and
Wow.
just really setting up even their gut flora, and all of that has totally changed the trajectory of this baby's health,
Yeah.
which is so cool.
The before and after is just tremendous, isn't it?
Hmm.
Because you have people that come into the relationship who are really scared. You
Yeah.
know, they're frightened for their baby. They think that they're doing something wrong. They feel somehow like their body's letting them down
Hmm.
sometimes. And to look at that child, sometimes I can think of somebody that we've been working with just even like a month later, and having that little baby go from someone who's just screaming and crying like
Sure.
every time that you meet her, to someone who just sits there and smiles at you and has these
Hmm.
little chubby cheeks starting to form. And I always think about like how that then is going to impact that family dynamic. The stress
Yeah.
that some of these parents must be feeling. I know so my son Forrest, when he was born, he was a belly birth, and man, he had a lot of cranial distortion. He had a really long shaped head. I don't think I even appreciated that until I was showing him some pictures of his birth over his birthday when he was, I think it was when he turned 4, and I looked at his head in a way different way. I saw how long it was. Like
Hmm.
it was like football shaped, because he'd spent 47 hours in that birth canal
Sure.
trying to get out, and then got pulled back out the other way. And he was an angry baby. Like he was, for his first 7 months, he would just scream himself to sleep. And so I was thinking a lot about like even his nursing relationship with his mom. She tried and tried and tried with everything that we had been, taught, and we had like the nurses coming in, and we had a couple lactation consultants come over, and she just like watched him go from like middle of the road. He was 8 pounds. He was 8.5 pounds when he was born, but then by the time he was about 3 weeks old, he went from the 50th percentile down to the 13th
Hmm.
percentile. And man, it felt like we were like out in the
Sure.
wilderness. Like it was the Wild West for
Hmm.
recommendations. We really felt lost. And then when someone recommended some supplementation for his mom, all of a sudden her body just started switching on.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, as you're talking about, are there endocrine things related with it? I mean, that's completely possible. But just from a personal standpoint, seeing, I mean, and I just looked at a picture of him. His brother just turned 5 months old, and I look back at it through Google Photos at a 5 month picture of Forrest, and he was the baby then who had like the extra non-anatomical creases.
Uh-huh.
He had all these like he had like three
Yeah.
forearms, and so like he recovered great.
Right.
Um, but to think about how that impacted us,
Hmm.
that it was a thing we didn't need to worry about.
Right.
He was being fed. He was happy. That was something that, and he's still like 5.5 years old. He'll still like kind of look at it every
Hmm.
once in a while. Go, yeah, I could probably go back to that.
Sure.
But when we're looking at then how his oral motor stuff goes with the sensory reflexes,
Mhm.
he's still very much a tactile like kid. When we were sleeping this morning, I was watching him just kind of like chewing on his thumbs
Sure.
and things like that. And I don't know, have you had any opportunity to talk with moms who are doing extended breastfeeding
Hmm.
too, about just how things are going to change for their bodies if they get pregnant again, any of that kind of stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a lot of moms who are still breastfeeding, get pregnant with
Hmm.
their second or subsequent child, and it it gets a bad rap. Being pregnant while breastfeeding,
Hmm.
it is safe in most cases to continue breastfeeding through your whole second pregnancy. Breastfeeding can cause some uterine contraction
Hmm.
after delivery. It's very recognizable, but even during pregnancy. So if we had concerns with the previous child of preterm delivery, or there were health concerns, or the pregnancy was very challenging, some providers may recommend, just for safety of the second baby, that we discontinue. But for healthy mom, healthy baby, we can go ahead and continue breastfeeding through that. Of course, our nutritional needs are going to increase
Sure.
because now you're supporting yourself, you're growing a human, and you're growing a human outside of your body, right? So those calorie contents definitely go up. Very important to be monitoring, vitamins. We may need even more than what is recommended. So talking with doctor, maybe doing some blood draws at those routine pregnancy labs, checking those specifically, because that's a lot of drain
Sure.
on your body. Just from a physical standpoint too, you've got bone density that we need to
Hmm.
monitor. Baby's pulling all of those nutrients, and so is the breast milk. So, yeah, definitely nutritional aspects is very important to monitor.
Cool. What kind of so when you what's give me kind of like what it looks like when you're here in your space working with a mom. What
Mhm.
kind of tools are you working with? What's that look like for
Yeah,
her?
so for the most part, we're toolless, right? As long as she has breasts and we have a baby
Fair
whose oral
enough,
function
right?
is working, we could be in the car, right? We
Yeah.
don't really need anything specific. So I always have my scale with me. I love to do weighted feeds where we weigh the baby before the feeding and we weigh after. And that gives us a specific amount within 5 grams how much milk the baby took during that feeding. So that gives us a good idea of a starting point. How efficient is this baby? Were they able to take, 2 ounces in 30 minutes, or did it take us an hour to get there? And it gives me an idea how much energy is this baby using to get the amount of ounces that it's able to get in
Mm.
that time. So gives us a good starting point there as far as how much volume they're taking in. So definitely always have my scale with me. I usually have just some things just in case, like nipple shields. In some instances, we need those to get the baby latching or able to be at the breast. And other than that, that's it.
Okay.
Just a mom, a baby, a me, and a scale. Just
Who
driving around
how
Southwest Florida.
so do you in addition to being here in this space, you travel out to people's homes
Yeah,
too?
so I do home visits, and I do office visits, and then I do virtual visits as well. So it really depends on the needs of the family member. I really love offering home visits because if you think about women who had a C-section, they're
Hmm.
unable to drive right after delivery and need help.
Right.
So if their partner's not available to drive them around to all these appointments they need to get to, it can be challenging for them to get here to the office to be with me. So those home visits really keep that accessibility. Also, you already have all of your stuff at home. You don't need to schlep your breast pump and
Exactly.
things that you may be using here. So it really makes it easier during the postpartum period, and
Yeah,
people appreciate that.
we work with a lot of moms who are home birthers too,
Hmm.
and one of the recommendations, and we tried really hard to follow this as well with Charlie, is to just kind of den in.
Sure.
We've gotten the green light from some of the midwives that we work with to make the exception to staying in bed go get adjusted. But the thing that Dr. Danielle's been really excited to kind of bring into this practice at some point is also doing those postnatal home visits
Hmm.
too, because she knows how important that was to her
Sure.
recovery. And so to be able to kind of offer that, initially in for moms that you have a relationship with, I think is just a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, and babies have their own behaviors, and sometimes they do things at home in their own setting that they don't do here in the office. And moms are like, "Oh, he never feeds this way," or "Wow, he's way fussier than usual." And I always love the comparison. If I have a mom, I've been to their home,
Hmm.
and then the next visit they come to the office, and they're like, "Oh, this was so different." Either sometimes it goes better because they're not in their environment.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's way worse. So babies are very behavioral even at early age, and they
Oh,
know they're
really?
somewhere new. So yeah, it's always interesting to see. I had one client recently, I would go to her house and baby just would not feed. And then every time she came here, it was like a beautiful feeding. And so then I was like, well, do you want me to come to the house or the office? Oh, we're coming to the
Oh,
office.
wow.
So it's funny.
Maybe it was like the dog kept on messing
I
with the
don't know.
baby.
It's just something to be said. They know where they are if
Yeah.
they're at home or not. So it's
They
interesting.
really do, don't
Hmm.
they? I've noticed that too. Brand new babies will recognize the sounds of the office, the sounds of our
Sure.
voice. I'll have some tests that we'll do for like startling with sounds. There are some babies who don't respond at all,
Hmm.
and I say, and especially like for the parents who just this is their first child, right? And I go, do you guys have a dog at home? And they're like, yeah, we do. I'm like, ah, okay,
Yep.
that makes a lot of sense because they're used to the noise. That okay.
Sure.
So it's really fascinating. I have a friend of mine who works a lot with perinatal psychology, like the in utero for babies,
Hmm.
and just the things that they're able to pick up on.
Yeah, that's
Um,
always surprises me too.
isn't that
Yeah.
amazing? He told me that there is a study that they did on like everybody's familiar with EKGs, right?
Mhm.
Like the electrodes that they'll put on your chest to measure the waves in your heart. Well, one of the things that they like we don't really fully get when we're in our science classes is that electricity, when those fields are generated, they actually go in these kind of shells that stack on top of each other in distances away from where the source of the electricity is. There's these different fields that get generated, and they can be of varying strengths. And the one that's directly on the skin actually isn't the strongest field for
Hmm,
the heart. The strongest field for it is about the length of your elbow from your chest,
interesting.
right? Because how do we hold babies when we're nursing,
Right.
right? How do you hold your kids? How do you hold like someone that you love,
Hmm.
right? And that actual bond and connection there of that heart energy. I think as we talk about the different ways that babies can be, perceptive of
Sure.
things, is a really magical thing that again is something that regardless, we have some families that we've got babies who are fed through alternative means, and so it's still something that we really encourage both moms and for dads to really hold them as if they're
Yeah.
nursing, so for different reasons.
Same with skin to skin. Even if babies are not breastfeeding, skin to skin is biologically awesome
Right,
for every baby and something to just continue doing. Even if you're exclusively pumping or you're just giving formula, it's such amazing things for baby and mom.
tell me more. What kind of benefits do you know about skin to skin?
So skin to skin is very magical. Like in the first a couple hours after birth, a lot of hospitals have that golden hour program. But if you keep babies in that skin to skin position, they will find their way to the breast
Really?
and get themselves on because they're right there at the table. Those biological instincts of scent and like mapping their environment with their hands, using their mouth to kind of find their way through that oral stimulation. It's amazing what they can do. But skin to skin helps regulate body temperature. So, especially when mom is doing skin to skin, their breasts are like little thermal heaters. It will actually
Right.
warm up or cool down to meet baby's temperature needs.
Wow.
Helps regulate heartbeat, breathing, blood sugar. It can even increase blood sugar if a baby's in skin to skin,
Huh.
which is really cool.
That's
So,
fascinating.
stress hormones for mom and baby are lower in skin to skin. Babies cry less with the more skin to skin they do. So,
Wow.
yeah.
There's some really interesting changes too that a woman's body is going to go through to help that baby out. It's like even like the color of the areola will get
Hmm.
darker to help with because baby can't really see color really well
Sure,
when they first come
contrast
out,
is
but they can
needed.
see contrast
Hmm.
really well. And I know a friend of mine, she was like, "Wow, these got really super dark." She's like part Latina, and
Yeah.
it was a big shock for
Yeah.
her, right? But it was like, well, babies need targets,
Hmm.
and so it's really interesting. What other kinds of changes do you see with moms that like things that might be surprises to them that when you're teaching new moms, right? When you're teaching, okay, this is what because that was something I really liked that you said that you did these group classes at one
Yeah.
point in time. What other kinds of tips do you give moms heads ups on?
Yeah. So Montgomery glands are little circular glands. They look almost like little tiny skin tags or pimples that pop up on your areola during pregnancy. And they're glands that are there but aren't activated until
Hmm.
you get to a certain point in pregnancy, usually around you start colostrum around 16 to 20 weeks. Around that time, a lot of people are like, what is this? Like, this is new. And their whole job is to lubricate the area. They secrete a really thick oil that you don't see happening, but it
Hmm.
lubricates the areola. The scent of it is very similar to amniotic fluid. So it's super enticing for a
Really?
baby when they come out and they smell that. They're familiar with that. That's
Huh.
what they're swallowing for practice and swimming
Right.
in all the time. So it attracts them. And there's all these studies that babies know if they're on their mom or not because that scent is similar to
Oh
what
my
they're used
goodness.
to. Yeah.
Seriously.
So those glands lubricate a scenting oil, but also it's a cleaning. It helps clean the areola and nipple,
Huh.
keep it moist, and prevent infection. And that's something that we never notice until it doesn't happen until you're in your pregnancy, and then people are like, "What is
What's going
this?"
on
Yeah.
here? Yeah.
So signs that body is changing, preparing to breastfeed. A lot of women's the first sign that they're pregnant is that breast tenderness, and those are those hormones kicking in, starting the
Sure.
process.
Huh. Yeah. I wish that, I wish we had a better preconception and pregnancy
Hmm.
education about like kind of like a parenting 101,
Sure.
that really got people to understand, oh, these are the things that actually start shifting and changing in your
Hmm.
body on a regular basis. Is I think, having it be normal and natural to have skills
Sure.
that as a parent after the baby's born, even during like pregnancy, even during labor.
Yeah, and I think education is really important because in the
Yeah.
US especially, the average mom that I meet with, I always like to ask like, what is your exposure to breastfeeding before this point, like before you deliver your baby?
Yeah.
And for most women, they've never seen another woman breastfeed, or if they have, it was an older baby, which
Hmm.
is very different than breastfeeding a newborn. So, or it's social media, TV, like that office clip of gym and them feeding the wrong baby in the hospital. So that's their exposure.
Yeah.
So where in other cultures, everyone breastfeeds. They do it very publicly. You see, someone breastfeeding, and that's how you learn, even as a young girl. So we don't have that. So
Hmm.
we need education to kind of bridge the gap,
Yeah.
because there's not as many people breastfeeding, and they're not as public about it as some other cultures.
I think that's an important point too, that what you said about having, kids understanding the nursing relationship and
Mm-hmm.
how that can start influencing generationally,
Absolutely.
um, what how natural that is. I know our daughter Phoenix, I've watched her like nurse her babies,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's used to that, as opposed to remembering watching my little cousins grow up and the baby needed a bottle,
Right.
right? And so to shift those kinds of ideas about, oh yeah, this is just what mommies do.
Sure.
We nurse off of mommy, and then yeah, and then the baby's happy, and then he goes
Yeah.
to the bathroom.
I've always like I said, I have three boys, 5, 3, and 1, and I've always been very open about breastfeeding at
Hmm.
home, in public, because I want them to know like breasts have a physiological purpose,
Yeah,
right? So it kind of sets that tone, so it's not weird when they see another woman breastfeeding in
yeah,
public. It's
right,
not something we're shielding them from, because that's normal
yeah.
for our house biologically. That's just part of
I
life.
just think about how much things have changed here, and maybe it's because, I mean, honestly, I live in a bubble. I live in such a bubble of like holistic community that
Right.
sometimes I don't even see it anymore. But the I remember it wasn't very long ago that we started, like, we had a nurse in at Chick-fil-A.
Hmm.
That we had a mom ask to get covered up by a manager while she was feeding her kid.
Sure.
And so, like, what we suggested was maybe we cover up the other people
Right.
too while they eat,
Yeah.
because the way they eat was offending us,
Yeah.
right? And really, I don't hear those stories anymore. I think there may be a sea change that's starting to shift
Yeah,
here.
it's definitely getting better. And there's most states have laws now that anywhere you are legally allowed to be, you can breastfeed your baby.
Yeah,
So we're getting that like political protection. It's becoming more common. People are more vocal about it and not feeling so like I need to cover up because somebody said
yeah,
that. And so yeah, there's definitely a shift going, I've noticed, which is great.
that's fantastic. What do you so when you're working with moms who do run into challenges with latching, what would you say the top things are that you see that you're like, yep, here's some things that we can help with.
Sure. So the main one that's really easy to fix with a little education is positioning. So if you put your tongue behind your top teeth and roll it back towards your throat, you feel a hard palate, a ridge, and a soft palate.
Hmm.
When the
I'm
nipple,
doing I'm
yeah,
doing that
everybody
right
go
now.
ahead.
Yeah. Mm, 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 mm. Can't quite get back
When
there.
the
Yeah.
nipple hits the roof of the mouth firmly, that's what tells baby to create suction.
Oh, okay.
Then they suck the nipple to the soft palate. That's the safe zone where you get a nice, deep, comfortable latch.
Hmm.
So if the nipple is not angled toward the roof of the mouth, it's going straight in or down towards the tongue, even. Babies don't get that cue to create suction.
Huh.
So that's why when you put your finger in a baby's mouth or it's something firmer like a bottle, you're like, oh, wow, my baby sucks beautifully. Why can't they do that on me? We really have to look at, it's a game of angles sometimes. How are we presenting the breast, and it is in a way that we're going to trigger that sucking reflex? So changing the position a little bit, changing the way we're supporting the breast. A lot of people know about a breast sandwich, which is where you take the breast and compress it, right? But we can't just sandwich. We need to look at what angle is that sandwich. So if you got a cheeseburger for dinner and it's too
Hmm.
big for your mouth, your first instinct is to squish it down and line it up, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with the breast. We have to make sure it's going parallel to the mouth. It'd be really hard to eat your cheeseburger this way, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm sandwiching. Why isn't the baby getting it?
I would get so much in my mustache. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes it's little changes like that that help the baby be able to connect. All babies practice sucking in utero. They don't have to open big to suck their hand or suck their fingers in
Mm.
utero. That's a learned skill, right? So you're doing techniques like putting a little milk on your finger, tapping that top lip. It elicits that big opening reflex. So practice that even when it's not nursing time. to help encourage that big open. That's something we have to teach them to do, right?
Hmm.
So little changes like that can really make a difference without much intervention, right? That's just kind of more of a natural connection. If we have something anatomical, maybe mom's nipple is very flat or baby's palate is very high and that connection is just not able to be achieved, we can use something called a nipple shield, which is just a nice flexible piece of plastic that sticks out a little bit more. So it has 4 holes on the end. Milk flows through it the same way. We place it right over the nipple, and that allows babies to connect with mom, even though their anatomy may not be working at the moment to connect
Yeah.
naturally. So it gives babies practice at the breast, helps stretch the nipple out
Interesting.
inside a baby's mouth. Milk transfer is basically the same
Huh.
because shields have come a long way over time. So that's a good way to get baby on the breast, start practicing those skills, and then we work on weaning off of the shield.
Sure. That's a completely different reason for a shield than I was ever talked to
Yeah,
about.
so shields are not for dulling pain.
Huh.
That's like the number one reason people go get a shield.
Yeah.
It's because they're having a painful latch. It doesn't fix the latch.
Right.
It just blocks some of the sensation. So, painful latch, creased nipples, abraded nipples. That's something we need to work on latching, not just cover up with kind of a band-aid.
Yeah.
And I almost hate that you can just run into Target and grab one without getting any
Sure.
knowledge on it or education about why you need it. Because a lot of moms I meet with that have a nipple shield don't actually need it. We're able to make those minor, positioning adjustments, and baby
Oh
gets
wow.
on. So, it is a barrier between mom and baby. So, some of those signals that we've been talking about from mouth to breast to brain to
Yeah.
maintain supply and, do immunities and all those things we spoke to are dulled with the shield. So, the goal is to get baby directly on.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. You said something else earlier too that made me like there are things that we do as parents that I think sometimes we just feel like doing it,
Mhm.
but there's like all this ancestral DNA telling us, "Hey, try this
Right.
out."
Right.
Because my son Charlie, when we do that little tapping game with him, and he's like a shark, he goes ah like that. He'll just follow you as you
Sure.
tap his lip. I never really like thought in a conscious way about why I do things like
Hmm.
that. There's somebody once told me too that the okay, so if you aren't a parent yet, what I'm about to say is going to sound really strange. I just want to warn you about that. But there is this uncontrollable urge once you have a baby to just go ahead and just like you just kiss them. You just want to lick them. You're just like my baby looks delicious. And like there's this transfer of your microbiome that happens on a regular basis to your baby to like just like here eat the inside of my mouth, right? Try this out.
Have some of my
have,
germs.
have some of my stuff. And it's always like we do these weird things, and we feel like we're kind of strange for wanting to eat our babies.
Sure.
But yeah, no, it's just all about some of those interesting transfers and the way that we play with them and play with their fingers and play with their mouths, and it's all about all these like really deeply wired, I think, parenting instincts
Yeah.
that some of us haven't, like I said, we haven't seen it, and
Yeah.
so we catch ourselves doing some of this stuff, we feel like weirdos. We're like,
Hmm.
wow, I hope nobody finds out that I lick my baby all the time,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I mean, if you look, I had an opportunity. I've had a couple kind of crazy experiences meeting Ina May Gaskin, the kind of who I would consider the Michael Jackson of the midwifery world. Like
Okay.
she's the name everybody
Sure.
knows, right? But she came down here to Fort Myers for her quilt project that she does for helping to support the awareness about maternal mortality.
Hmm.
And one of the things that she said at the dinner that we had was that if you have questions about things, sometimes nature just has really good examples
Sure.
all over. And you
Sure.
think about like, you know, I we had dogs when I was growing up. And those dogs were constantly licking the puppies, right? Just
Hmm.
always doing that. And you think like, oh, that's just like a cleaning thing, right? We're mammals too,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so I guess that would kind of make sense to me that there are things that we would do that would be similar to like what it looked like to have my dog have puppies,
Sure.
right? Do a lot of
Speaking of like
licking and that
innate
kind of stuff.
biological sense, like babies have those too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we get in their way. So from a breastfeeding perspective, babies cluster feed, and they usually do it around day 3, end of the first week, third week of life. And cluster feeding is when a baby's going from eating like every 3 hours and you have to wake them up to feed them because they're just so sleepy. And all of a sudden, it's like you cannot get this baby off of you. Like,
Huh.
this is going to be the never ending feeding. I'm going
Yeah.
to be feeding this baby all night. They're just eat, eat, eat. And a lot of moms are like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. I don't have enough milk for my baby. They're starving. All they're doing is showing these hunger cues and I just can't satisfy them. But they are growing your milk supply. So
Ah.
stimulation is how your brain gets the signal to increase the supply. So how does our body increase supply as our baby grows, right? On day one, they take about 5 mLs. By day three, we're up to about an ounce. How
Yes,
does
how
that
much
happen?
their tummy is like
Yeah,
this big,
so
right?
tiny. So how does our body know their tummy's grown between day of life one and day three when their tummy goes up to an ounce? They stimulate our body, they cluster feed, and they just have
Huh.
this innate sense to like be on the breast and just eat more. And our brain gets that signal, and that's how it jumps the milk supply.
Huh.
So you can look at all these charts of how tummy sizes grow over time and how a mom's milk supply is right there. And we don't have to do anything to tell our bodies to do that.
Isn't that great?
Babies do it. That's their instinct.
Oh wow. I love that. That's the
Mm-hmm.
because we run into, I think, well-meaning advice
Sure.
that's a bit of patriarchal advice from like male pediatricians who are
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, schedule.
Yeah.
You got to put the baby on schedule. They're the same people who say, well, you're going to spoil that kid,
Right.
if you keep on doing this. And if we just step back a little bit and say, that baby came from two cells that were smart enough to make this,
Right.
right? There
Yes.
must be something in there
Yeah.
that was worthwhile in order to create this kid. If you just kind of start with that premise that life is intelligent, then
Sure.
backing off and saying, okay, well, what is this kid trying to tell me right now?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the biggest reasons for us, understanding either like some families will choose to co-sleep, or some have like a little co-sleeper or something close. I'll tell you, I can't imagine when I have parents who tell me that they get up in the middle of the night to go feed the baby. I'm just like, man, it sounds like your life is like really hard. Like that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because we've always just been like, okay, here you go.
Right. Right.
As long as we're not like going to bed drunk and on heavy medication,
Yeah.
right? It's not like we're bringing a butcher knife into. I swear, I saw a public health announcement that had a baby and a butcher knife right next to it and said, co-sleeping is this dangerous. And I
No.
went, what kind of ad is that? But when there's definitely safe sleep practices, it's actually some
Sure.
of the stuff that we screen for to make sure babies are okay, that they can roll away from danger. But if all that's all good, like, why would you make your life harder?
Sure.
I
And
mean,
we're one of the only countries that is so separative in the sleep environment.
isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
I don't know. I blame sometimes Henry Ford for some of that. He's like, okay, I got this great idea. We're going to put everybody in factories and everybody's going to have a job. And, we're going to, you got to toe
Sure.
the line this. Generations of people are like, oh, that must be how we have to work. So we got to train these babies because,
Mhm.
got to be on a schedule all the time. And I don't know. I think we are raising our kids in a much different future environment.
Sure.
That they're going to have different opportunities to have different jobs, to work from home, to work in outer space, to go into Space Force. Who knows what they're going to do, right? But their life is just going to be so much different than, say, like our grandparents and even our parents.
Sure.
And what kind of like regularity they needed. I'm a big fan of the attachment parenting concepts because I think that things have shifted. And even though these concepts are like hundreds of years old,
Yeah.
right? It's like
They're just coming back.
they're just coming back into Western culture.
Yeah.
We're going, okay, let's kind of correct some of the stuff that we did before.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that nursery relationship is a great way to do that. Preserving that dyad for me is probably one of the most important jobs that I have. Whether it's helping with the baby who's having latch, mechanical issues, pre-digested or post-digested reflux stuff, whatever we need to figure out. So
Sure.
I'm really, really happy that we get to work together.
Yeah,
So,
it's awesome.
yeah. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us for this masterclass. If you guys have any questions, Sarah's very easy to reach out to. We'll post her information here. We'll have, obviously, you can swing by the Fort Myers location and meet her in person. I really
Sure.
encourage that. She's been a very active member on some of our social media too. And so I'd really, really encourage you. Like, I'm really looking forward to us having like the bigger space where we're going to be able to have those classes and things like that,
Absolutely.
because I think that's what an asset. to
Oh,
this
yeah.
community.
So huge.
All right. Again, if you have any friends that are going through some of this too, share this video with them. these master classes are meant to be a benefit to our community. And so if you have people who are going through struggles, or even like Sarah said, you don't just like you don't have to have neck pain and back pain to get adjusted,
Right.
you don't have to have breastfeeding challenges to come see
Yeah.
her.
Sometimes you just need a cheerleader or somebody
Right?
to tell you that you are doing it right.
Yeah.
Don't worry as much.
Yeah. So it's affordable. She tells me she takes insurance. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of crazy things that I'm learning
Most
from
people
her.
don't know that.
Yeah, no, it's
Breastfeeding help is covered by insurance
yeah.
with the passage of the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's really no barriers here. So yeah, I really look forward to you guys getting to meet her and seeing why we're such big fans of Thrive too. Have a great day, and I hope you all take great care. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.